leaving things pretty open and letting you get out there
Okay.
if you want to get out there.
Cool.
So
Are we rolling?
we're rolling, and I'll just
Nice.
cut it off there.
Gotta love digital.
Yeah. I think we're ready to go. All right, so we're at Blues and Beyond with Jim Carty, and I'm with Scott Sherrod. How you doing, Scott?
Good. Thanks for having me, buddy.
My pleasure. And, the one big thing we probably should get out of the way to discuss is, you just came back from Gregg's memorial.
Yeah.
Tell me about the feelings that you were having and just the kind of the scene. I know these things are heartbreaking, but also it's good to see old friends, and that can be cathartic. So, what kind of emotions were going on?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty personal experience. I'm not really sure if I'm ready to start talking about it yet, but
No, I understand. Not so
we
much.
had a long run. Gregg and I, it started in 2008. I started as his guitar player, and eventually, we started a songwriting partnership. And I was lucky enough to have him actually even record one of my own songs a couple times. And then it kind of, in the 2 or 3 years ago, it kind of burgeoned into me being his band leader. So we got real close. We were working on a lot of music. Certainly when the Allman Brothers called it quits a couple years ago, I think he felt like it was his chance to really have a final shot at realizing his ultimate musical vision, which was to have this 9-piece band with 3 horn players. He always wanted that.
Yeah.
And I think he was doing it at an immense cost, because he was very much in a bad way health-wise the whole time I'd known him, and
Yeah.
we were tearing up the road. And I can also say that on a more hopeful note for fans, we have a studio album in the can, which we recorded last January, actually in Muscle Shoals at the famous Fame Studio, with Don Was producing, and the road band that we had worked so hard to put together is actually on the entire record.
And I'm really glad, because Floating Bridge, that was Don's guys, right?
No, that was
it?
the record is Low Country Blues,
Or Low Country Blues,
and that
yeah.
was T-Bone Burnett produced that.
T-Bone Burnett's
Yeah.
crew.
Yeah.
But Don, who produced the tribute to Gregg down in Atlanta, I flew down for that.
Yeah, that's right,
which
the
was
All My
amazing.
Friends tribute.
God, that was wonderful. I was only a couple rows back, and I thought Jack Pearson stole the night.
Oh yeah, he's one of
he
my
was a
favorite
monster.
players, man. He's
Oh my
amazing.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Don musically, when I was at that show, whenever I've seen Don on stage, he's and as a band leader yourself, that there's that respect that you can quietly command, and just with a nod or the looks are.
Yeah, there's always a balance. I mean, you
Yeah.
got to strike a balance between making sure everyone's being professional and kind of keeping
Yeah.
an eye on things, but then you've also got to, at the same time, respect the hang and the chemistry
Yep.
that makes great music possible. And
Yeah.
a lot of that is, you got to have sort of a punk rock spirit with like a jazz musician's professional knowledge of music.
Right.
I mean, that's what it requires to play music like the Allman Brothers music, because there's so much, or Gregg Allman Band, Allman Brothers, any kind of that sort of school music that those guys started. I mean, it's a true fusion of the best of American music. It's all in there: country, folk, rock, jazz, blues, rhythm and blues, soul. It's all in every song. You listen to a song like anything from all those waltz feel songs like Queen of Hearts to Dreams to, obviously Whipping Post and those numbers, and then you've got Hot Atlanta. I mean, they're all like they're all jazz waltzes, and then you've got some of the more, just really sturdy, built like a tank songwriting, like Midnight Rider. Is obviously one of those songs. And then you've got the more funky tunes like Don't Keep Me Wondering, and you got the blues shuffles like Statesboro, and you got the slow blues. I mean, it's all in there. And I think for every kind of musician, that music is just a joy to play. And for some of us, like me, I grew up a fan, and the Allman Brothers have always been a template for every band I've ever formed, because they sort of stand for this principle. It's kind of this, it's just this beautiful amalgamation of all these styles, and but still with that, like I was saying, that sort of garage band aesthetic at the heart of it. Truly, the first draft of the Allman Brothers were also, they were very much a family with their roadies, and the band and the whole organization was like one big family, living in Macon, all together in the same house for a short period of time, which is now, of course, the museum,
Love
the Big House Museum, yeah.
And there's a lot, actually, my being from Boston, there's a lot of memorabilia. Boston, right up until the end, was a hotbed of Allman.
One of them, yeah.
Allman is there.
Yeah, yeah.
The promoters up there in Boston really just always loved the brothers.
Yeah, I mean, they dominated the Eastern Seaboard their whole career. I mean, I always said, the heart of touring for us with Gregg was just up and down the East Coast, tip of Florida to the tip of New England, sell out everywhere.
Gregg actually told me that his first Boston gig was on Harvard Commons, right there in Cambridge.
Now, is that gig where they were sleeping on the floor and there was some jury-rigged power in the place they were staying?
No, that I don't know, but he did say that it was, there's like a Commons right outside of Harvard Square where they, slop out free food to the bums.
And that's the one where they carried the organ up 2 flights.
That could be.
That's what he always used to say about that gig. There was 2 things. They stayed in a really janky, like, tenement type scenario.
Nice.
And they had to carry the B3 up like 2 flights of stairs to the gig.
But they did what they had to crisscross the country, and
yeah.
It was funny. So in the mid-'90s, I booked a band with Jay Giles in it, and one night we were in New York, and I was reading an Allman Brothers biography.
Yeah.
And so he was like, Jimmy, we did the final run at the Fillmore, and the 2 bands had the same strategy of crisscrossing the country and being hard-working bands. And we got to know each other right down to the roadies, as you said. And this is, I remember one night, one band was at Madison Square Garden, and the other band, and I think the Allmans were at Carnegie Hall. Says somebody just grabbed me from the backstage door, whipped me down to Carnegie Hall, and next thing I know, I'm jamming with Dwayne. And just the magical moments in those stories you hear from those guys. Did you hear any stories that you would love to recount from Gregg?
There were tons, man. I mean, his book is actually a really great representation of some of his best stories, and certainly those were stories that, preceding the book, there were a lot of stories that he would tell. I mean, I always traveled on the same bus with him. The rhythm section would travel on one bus with him and his best friend and personal assistant, Shank Middleton, who's
Shank's
also
a good guy. Yeah.
Man, I mean, he's part of he's one of the ventricles of the heart of the operation from the beginning, from the first rehearsal. I mean, Shank is he's part of the soul of what made that band possible, and was honestly, the heart and soul, I think, of what kept Gregg going on the road when we were burning up the road, and he was, especially when he was struggling health-wise. It was great to have Shank there.
Yeah.
For so many reasons too, because he's such a great hang, man. Actually, the stories I got.
Always a smile from Shank.
Yeah. The stories I got from Shank actually were the ones that I didn't read in the book, and there were some really good tidbits, man. I mean, I'd be here all night if I was talking about it, but
right.
Yeah, we had some great hangs. But I would recommend, if anybody wants to know, I mean, that book, Cross the Bear, man, he really lays it all out in there. It kind of reminds me of I kind of skimmed it. We had a copy on the bus for a couple tours, and I was skimming through it. But it's funny, as I would read it, it was like I was hearing stories over and over again, and I didn't get through the whole thing. But I loved experiencing his voice through that book, because I think they really nailed. I believe it was Alan Light was the ghostwriter on it from Spin Magazine.
Yeah,
I think if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, Alan, if I got that wrong, but I think it was Alan. Because he came out on the road with us a couple times, and I know he was writing a piece or helping Gregg write the book, but they just nailed it. They really nailed his tone, and I think they got some of his best road stories, for sure. If you're looking for road stories, most of them are in there. The cocaine plate on the plane that never flew, and, the days of 70s, record business expense accounts, and high living, and, leading to the eventual, lawyering up and getting your rights back. And I mean, it's a story that was your classic behind the music arc of that 60s hippie idealistic band becoming a 70s top of the entertainment industry monolith to the crash of drug addiction and tragedy. It was all there in his life. He was certainly part of that.
I think what resonated for, my friends and I that just love the brothers and love Gregg and are taking it so hard, is that Gregg is one of us, though. Like, I often say that, people are both divine and flawed at the same time. And, Gregg obviously had fatal flaws, and like Stevie Ray Vaughan, he had overcome those addictions and demons at the end of his life, and he had a lovely wife, and he had been with her a long while, and he was trying to get healthy, and it was just too damn late. And I think anybody can relate to those kind of struggles that he had, and go,
Yeah.
damn it, now,
Well, it's a central
now
part.
the Lord took him,
The protagonist in his songs, going back to his first songs he was writing when he was in his late teens, he was 19, going into his 20s, that was probably just pound for pound his most prolific period.
Yeah.
Was when he was in his 19, 20, 21, 22. Those were his best years in terms of just the sheer volume of output. Melissa, Dreams, Whipping Post, Please Call Home. I mean, all those songs came out of him at those ages. And
although we talked about the pressure he was under when he first joined the band to
well,
produce songs,
I mean, look,
the guys
man,
were like, come on, dude.
it's not so much pressure as it was Dwayne Allman, man. I mean, Dwayne Allman was,
A tough brother to have, too.
I mean, I honestly, I think he's like the best band leader, in rock and roll. It's pretty much him and Jimmy Page. I mean, they're the two in my estimation. I mean, obviously someone like Jimmy Page, he had, he lived much longer and realized much more, and of course realized this whole kind of panoramic vision. But Dwayne was heading to something. If he hadn't have perished at 24 years old, man, we would have. I can't imagine the music we would have been given.
It's always a head scratcher when you think 24.
Yeah.
What were you doing at 24? How much did you accomplish by 24?
Well, I think also part of the thing with those guys is you got to remember they were like they were in the middle of this cultural zeitgeist where you have to remember